Alrighty, and we're on. So I was just trying to get this pronunciation right, but it's Faine
Yes.
Mesquita.
Yes, perfect.
Hey,
Yay.
okay.
Yeah.
So what's the origin of, like, I guess, what background is that name from? It's Brazilian?
Well, Brazilian could be like several things, right? So Mesquita is Portuguese.
It's Portuguese, okay.
Could be Spanish as well.
Yep.
Like they have a common background. And Faine is mostly my mother's creation.
Your
She
mother's
just liked the sonority of these letters together, the A and the I in Portuguese.
Yep.
And she recalls seeing that in a book when she was like 13, but obviously she doesn't remember which book that was.
Wow.
And
Okay.
I never found that character. So,
Yeah. So when you say, it was a character in a book.
yeah.
Yep. And they had that name, Faine, and
Yes.
that's what inspired her for that name.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. And so you're the oldest of 3 siblings?
Yes.
Yep. And you grew up in Brazil?
Yeah, I grew up in São Paulo.
In Sao Paulo, yep. And I guess, talk me through, like, what do you remember about that? Like, what's your earliest memory? Do you remember much about being there?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Bring that mic a little bit closer to you. Yeah.
Sure.
So I don't know just make it a bit clearer. So, yeah.
So I have actually some vague recollections from when my older of my younger brothers was born. I was 2.5.
Yep.
I remember being angry.
Angry.
Yes.
And what were you angry about?
Oh, because my mom left. She disappeared. She vanished, She went to the hospital to
Okay.
have my brother. So
Yeah.
for me, it was just weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's probably one of my earliest memories there. And then the other brother is 8 years younger than me. I remember much more clear. Actually, we chose his name, so we were excited
Yep.
about the new kid.
Yep.
And São Paulo is not a city that you just, I don't know, as a kid, you play much on the streets, etc. So most of the time it would be me and my siblings playing video games at home.
Yep.
My mom actually was the one who introduced it to us. Like, she was into video games as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she used to play Atari back in the day.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so she actually said, "Oh, I'm gonna get you guys a video game," and we were like, "Oh no, we're boring. Like, this is boring. We're gonna be sitting in front of the TV. Like, we don't want that."
Yep.
Well,
what was the first game that you guys played?
I think it was one of the Marios. I don't remember which one
Yeah.
it was. Like, I was really young at the time.
Yeah. Isn't it like, so I think back to my own childhood as well, and there was a lot of gaming in that as well. And not for any other reason than my mum, when she came to Australia, one of the first things that she had as a business was a computer store. So that was in the, the IBM 386 days, the 386, the 486, and, Windows 3.1, like the old version before, what we currently see today. But I've got a brother who's 7 years older than me, so he was naturally pretty good at with computers. And so I just sort of picked up from him, like whatever games he would play, I'd try and copy and learn how to play and do those sorts of things. But, I guess for you, did that create some pretty happy memories, with your brothers?
Yeah,
Yeah. Did you guys ever get into fights over the games?
I don't remember that.
No?
No.
Okay. So sibling-wise, like, how would you describe your relationship with your brothers? Like, I guess, being the oldest,
Yeah.
I guess, was there any, did you guys fight, or did you guys always get along? Like, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I think the three of us, we like to do our own thing.
Yep.
Like, we do like to spend time alone.
Yeah.
So the three of us, we like reading, we like music, but at the same time, like, we are very, very similar. So, like, we share pretty much like our favorite bands. If you see it to this day, like, our most listened songs, like, they're still the same, even though we're so far away and having like different lives.
Yeah.
So I guess we always had like this sort of influence on each other. Like, oh, look, we just found this band. Like, you wanna listen together. So this type of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. And so then, in terms of like growing up in Sao Paulo, like, what do you remember much about the place?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what are the things that stand out to you, I guess, So obviously you've been in Australia for 7-8 years now.
Yeah, 7 years.
Yeah. So was it like? I guess there would obviously be a bit of a culture shock when you come here, right? Like a very different sort of vibe.
Yes and no. In São Paulo, I was like we call like an apartment kid. So I was not I didn't grow up in a big property or like with a yard or anything like that.
Yep.
So that's probably explains like our interest for video games and things like that
Yep.
that you do indoors.
Yep.
Also didn't have many friends at school, so I do remember the place. I remember like going out with my dad like to I remember going out with my dad and like I had a bicycle, so
Yep.
we would do things like that.
Yep.
But on a daily basis would be mostly like waking up, going to school, coming back home. I wouldn't interact much with the city in that sense.
Yeah.
You know?
So then you just mentioned something that I wanted to expand upon. You mentioned that you didn't really have many friends.
Yeah.
What do you think that was? Like, was it your choice? Like, you just you enjoyed to spend time with yourself, or?
Originally, I don't think so. So I first went to school when I was 5.
Yeah.
Kindergarten.
Yep.
And I was bullied by everyone, pretty much.
Wow.
And in Brazil, it's a bit different than here in Australia. You don't have like 4 school terms. I don't even know how it works because, well, I didn't go to school here.
Yeah.
But there you only have like one break in July.
Mm-hmm.
That's like nearly a month. And one break in December, January. That's like a month and a half.
Yeah.
And I remember like after the first term, after July, I didn't want to go back to school.
Wow.
It was that bad.
And was there something in particular that the other kids would tease you about, or?
Yes, and that's a shock for most people that I say that here in Australia, but they would always tease me about my hair and my color.
Really?
Yes.
So, okay. And
they have ways to differentiate themselves.
Yeah. So, okay. And I'm here I am as an Asian bloke, right? Like, so I grew up, I was born in Australia. And for me, the first time that I ever sort of realized that I was different to anybody else was, I think I was in year 1. So I would have been like 6.
In school, right?
In school, right?
Before that, was everything okay?
Yeah, like you never really. You know, I grew up out west, so in a suburb called St Clair, which is people would call us Westies, I guess, or they refer to those suburbs as Westie suburbs. So predominantly white area. The kids on my cul-de-sac all white, but I used to play with them, be out on the bikes, do all that sort of stuff, and we'd just all play in the street, kind of a thing. And it was only until year 1, and it was a kid named Jason. I can't remember his surname, but he was teasing me about something like, calling me like a ching chong Chinaman or whatever. And, and I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but my reaction wasn't very good. And I ended up pushing him into the trough, like where all the boys piss. So I apologize if that scarred him for in whatever way being, thrown into other people's piss. But, but that was my first experience that I realized that, hey, why is this guy teasing me about something that, I didn't really realize there was anything different about me, right? So I guess, for you in that circumstance, like I would have thought Sao Paulo was, or like even your school would have been very eclectic, like very mixed.
It wasn't. No.
So I guess
depends on the suburb where you live,
Yeah.
My mom always tried to get us into the best schools as possible. So that would probably mean most of the kids were white for Brazilian standards.
Yeah.
Or I think so.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, close enough.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm whiter than you. So that was always where the bully would be.
Yeah.
About nothing else.
Yeah.
I was never like the skinny kid, the chubby kid. It was just always about my hair and my color.
Yeah, wow. And they're very difficult things to do anything about. You can't change them, right? Like for you as a kid, when you were experiencing that, like, did you talk to your parents about it? Did you?
Yes, obviously I had to tell my parents that I didn't want to go back to school, and they want to know why. And I explained like the best way I could with the vocabulary that I had, And I just remember that my mom told me, okay, you can do now this year, but like you can't do that again because after that it would be like mandatory to be in school after, preschool and year one, etc.
Yeah.
So for that first year, I just cut it short.
Yeah.
I didn't go back for August until December.
Wow.
But when I turned 6, I had to go back to school. Yeah. And it was only worse, actually.
It got worse.
It got worse. It got quite much worse.
Yeah. And you don't have to share any of these if you don't feel like it, but I'm just, was there anything particularly hurtful? Like, was there certain things that they would say that would really make you upset? I know at that age, most things, if you're getting teased by a majority of the school or majority of your grade, you'd probably feel quite upset all the time.
Yes, I remember just like not liking going to school anymore. It was like, why do I have to do this? Why do I could just sit here at home and read a book and learn? And why do I have to endure all these insufferable kids around me? And it would be like, you can have like up to 40 kids in the same classroom, Obviously some people don't attend or whatever. But like having 35 people calling you names and singing songs about you can be quite disturbing.
Yeah. So that actually like come up with like rhymes and things.
Yeah. Or there was some like very rare occasions where they would actually like, try to push me or do things like physically because I would just pretend they are not there. I would just absolutely ignore, open a book in front of me and just pretend they weren't there.
Yep. And did the teachers do anything about it? No?
No.
They didn't care?
Mm-mm.
Wow. Wow. I'm just, the reason why I'm pausing to think about it is because I think about, if that was my child, like how would I feel? If it was me, how would I feel? Like it's a very traumatic thing to go through.
Oh, yes.
Because I know my initial probably reaction is that, is there something wrong with me? Like that it's my fault that, all these other people are blaming me or whatever, rather than sometimes people are just shit, right?
Yeah. I think I was aware of that, like from a very, very early age, that it wasn't me. The problem wasn't me.
Yeah. And would that be, your parents helping you, like telling you, hey, there's nothing wrong with you?
Yeah. And also, well, my mom has been, she went to school quite a few times because, some of those interactions were not ideal. Yeah. And she would just like defend me, like.
So did you get into fights?
A few.
Okay. So, and when you did get into fights, was it with other girls or was it with boys?
Both. Yeah.
Wow. And wow. Okay. So, and I'm a bit lost for words there, like, 'cause it just, I feel like, if it's girls fighting with girls, it's one thing.
It doesn't matter that age. Like when you're 6 years old,
probably not.
Really,
right?
they compete together in jiu-jitsu or other martial arts. And also, I had the advantage that my birthday was in February. I was kind of a big kid.
Oh, okay. So you were big, you were slightly older than some of the other kids.
Yeah, some of the other kids, they would be born, July, August, December. So it makes a difference.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So then I guess from that, when you were going to, so, you'd obviously be in your own world when you're at school, like you'd focus on reading or learning. Yeah. Yep. Investing in your own things. Did it ever get any better? Like as you got older, like, when you started, so did you finish your schooling in Sao Paulo?
Yeah. I think it only got better when I went to high school.
Okay.
Because I went to a completely different school where you have like tests to be admitted, and it was a public school, but it was like one of the best schools in the whole country. Yep. And it was really hard to get in. So everybody who were there kind of had a similar story.
Yeah, they all had to work to get into it.
Yeah. So it was like it was since kindergarten until like when I was like 14. Yeah. Was pretty much the same. Yeah. Until high school was completely gone.
Okay. Totally different environment.
Yeah, I cannot put this in like year 12 or whatever because I don't know.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know. But when I was like, until I was 14, it was one thing. The next year I was like, wow,
This is totally
that's
totally
how this should have been
Yeah.
my whole life.
Yeah. So then, can you describe that next year for me? Like, you know, when you went to this new school, obviously you would have found people that might have had similar interests as well, because obviously they're all quite smart to get into that school if you had to do exams and.
Yeah. So it was the time I made more friends in school, because before I would have 1 or 2 per year. That would be maybe 3 would be the maximum that I can recall.
Yep.
We would do things outside of school, go to cinema, play D&D or whatever.
Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah.
What, the card game or which version?
Yeah.
Yeah, the card game. Okay. Yeah. So my brother and I, we used to play the arcade version. There's an arcade Dungeons and Dragons, which is like like a scrolling beat 'em up style. Yeah, which is a lot of fun. But okay. And then, so what are the things that you were into in high school? Like, I guess, you know, you mentioned Dungeons and Dragons. Like, did your interest in video games and that still continue in that stage, or did you start getting into other things that you're interested in?
Oh yes, it did. Then I started playing computer games as well. So I was really into Counter-Strike at the time.
Yes.
So whenever we didn't have a class, or we had some free time, we would go and play in the LAN house.
Yep.
Good times.
Yep.
Also, I was still really much into literature, and we had like a very nice library. So every week I was there getting another book, and I missed that. Like reading a different book every week is not. I don't understand how I had this much time.
Yeah.
But I did.
Well, I think, you know, so I have like a love-hate relationship with books. And the reason why I have a love-hate relationship with books is because sometimes it takes me a little bit of time to get into a book.
Yeah.
But then, like, when I use the Dune series, the Frank Herbert Dune series as an example. Like, once I started reading the first book of Dune, I was like an absent father, absent husband for like 2 weeks while I smashed out all 6 books. Like, it was like every waking moment I'd have my phone and my wife would be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, I'm reading. All right. And then the kids would be like, "Oh, Dad, get me this." And then I'll be doing that, but I'll be reading at the same time. It's like, so I have this personality where I get obsessed with things. And so when I really get into something, like, I have to keep going until I get to the end.
Oh, yes.
And so that's why I have this love-hate relationship. I have the same thing with like watching TV shows or drama series and like those sorts of things, because like there are some Chinese drama series that are like 42 episodes long, right?
You have to binge them all.
I got to binge them all.
Right now.
Yeah. Like, so as an example, like if you, there's like always series coming out, but like let's say there's 42 episodes. Each episode is 40 minutes. So I have to, once I get into it, I'm gone for a week or so while I just, at night, I'll be watching till, 2, 3 a.m. And I was really bad with this in high school. Like at one stage I got like at high school, actually more like uni. In uni I was really, really bad because I had my own little computer. And so I just, be in my bed with the computer sideways and just watching until 3, 4 a.m. And it was like, oh my goodness, like what am I going to do? I got to go to sleep and wake up. And then I'd wake up, and then if I woke up early enough, I might watch another episode and just keep going until I had to finish it. Like,
no life.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. That's just my personality though. But like, did you get pretty obsessed? Like,
I used to be like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I also had less distractions as well. I didn't have a full-time job when I was a teenager, this type of stuff. There are some books that I read like in a week. I think the last one that I was probably like 2 years ago that I read like super quick, and it was quite long, was when I was on holiday. So,
What was the book?
Killing Eve.
Killing Eve. I haven't read that one, but yeah, what's that one about?
Oh, it's about two main characters. It's about one serial killer,
Okay.
and one MI5, MI6 agent, and the two of them are kind of in a love relationship, but they still have to, one is killing people, the other is trying to be a public servant. So it's a bit complicated.
Yep. Yeah, isn't it funny, like when you get hooked by something, you can just get so into it. Like, I played Counter-Strike as well, and I was really into games. I played a lot of StarCraft in high school and all that sort of stuff. Did you get pretty addicted to gaming at any stage, or?
Yeah, there are some games that I had to finish, or
Yeah.
but the last one that I was like that. No, not the last one, but I can remember that I had that urge to finish Yoshi's Island.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, it was a cute game.
Yeah, that's a cute game. So, in high school, did you have any idea what you wanted to do when you finished? Like, did you have any sort of goal?
I did.
Yeah.
I did have. Since I was a kid, I wanted to be a pilot.
A pilot?
Yeah, I wanted to go to Air Force.
Yep.
But then when I was like around 16, I realized that I was not going to meet the minimum height.
Okay. Yep.
Don't laugh. Was like the first time I was like seriously heartbroken in my life.
Wow.
And then I asked my mom to take me to a doctor to get
see
like
that.
growth hormones or...
Leg extensions or
And
something.
the doctor said, no, I'm not going to give that to you. It's dangerous. And they were not even allowed in the country anyway. And then I was completely lost. I didn't know what else I want to do.
So, first of all, what made you want to become a pilot? Like, what was it? What do you remember? What age?
Probably around 9, 10.
Yep.
So I spent like quite a few years of my early existence like settled on that idea.
Yeah. And was there anything that made you think that way? Like, was it like, so did you watch something that was like, oh, this is really cool?
I don't remember anything in particular, but I kind of liked like machines and like how they work. I was always puzzled by, this type of like engines and...
Yep. Yeah, the reason why I asked that is because I remember, so when I was a kid, there was this cartoon called Robotech. I don't know if you ever heard of Robotech.
No.
Macross, sometimes they call it Macross in Japan, but basically it's about like they have like fighter planes, but they can transform into like, I guess, battloids, these robots that can shoot and have different artillery as a result of it. So there's a whole like cartoon series which is about this, aliens and all this sort of stuff. And I was I really loved watching that show. Like we used to have this thing called Cartoon Connection in the mornings, and it was like 7:30 in the morning to 8 o'clock would be this show. And I remember watching that when I was young, and that was really, so like when I watched that, I was like, yeah, I'd love to be a pilot. I'd love to do this. I'd love to do that, right? Like, but I just feel like it's just because you're influenced by watching, this show that you really enjoy, that it makes you feel like, oh, that'd be something that'd be really cool to do. But I don't, I wasn't necessarily heartbroken when I realized that I couldn't be that. Whereas for you, to say that you were heartbroken, there had to be something that was really connecting you to that.
But I don't, it's funny that you mentioned that because I don't remember, like I didn't have like an idol or anything like that. I remember I like to read about the types and the models and when they were created.
Yep.
Like I would know all the specs at the time for like many like planes that I liked.
Yeah.
But there is no particular like reason that got me into it.
Yep. So then when you realize that, hey, I'm not going to meet the minimum height,
I was lost.
Yeah.
I was lost for quite a few years.
Yeah. And so then from like what were the subjects that you were doing in high school? Like, did you have to pick subjects? So here we get to pick. Yep.
Yeah. Not really. We have like a very extensive like mandatory curriculum.
Yep.
And that particular school there was like you would have like one elective subject. That's it.
Yeah.
So you have to do pretty much everything. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so were there any other subjects that, you really did well in or you really were interested in?
That was the problem. I did well in all of them. So even when I tried to get, counseling to help me out with it, you could do this, but you also could do that. I'm like, you're not helping me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very hard to pick. So one of the reasons why I started this podcast, and this can take a bit of a darker turn, but I always bring my friend up, Adrian. He was one of my high school friends, and he got the top mark that you can get in our high school certificate, so like our university entrance exam. And I remember asking him, what do you want to get into? Like, why are you studying so hard? And he said to me, Johnny, I just, whatever I want to do, I just want to make sure that I've got the mark so I can just go be like, okay, if I want to do that, I can do that. If I want to do this, I can pick whatever, right? But yeah, so it just made me think about that. But Adrian's no longer with us. He committed suicide, actually, a few years ago. But yeah, like he was just such a high achiever, but just didn't really have any, like I didn't understand the motivation at the time, like what was motivating him to be so determined to get such a great mark and do all these things. I worked it out after, and in retrospect, you know, I've thought about it a lot, and I realized for him, when we were in high school and I used to ask him about his parents because I knew he was living with his grandparents, he would just tell me that his mum was dead, and his stepdad, his dad was alive, but he had a stepmom, and you know he had some step siblings, and that was all good. But he lived with his grandparents along with his elder brother. And then when I think back on, you know, what was one of his motivations was that it was actually what was driving him was he always felt like he was not good enough because his mum left when he was very young. So, you know, I'm not saying that you have any of those sorts of motivations, but I guess I'm curious as to what made you so, like, did you work? You obviously you worked hard to get your marks, right? Or did you manage to just do it?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on the subject, but I would just be there, pay attention. I didn't think I work extra hard, you know. Yeah. Obviously, there would be some kids that would be distracted by other stuff, but I think there was a bit of dedication for 100%. But I don't think I did anything extraordinary.
Yeah. Okay. So then, when you finished school, what was next?
So I spent like pretty much the whole high school thinking what I'm going to do. And I was just trying, okay, I'm not doing this. So I was like, I don't want to do anything health related. But then
why not doing anything health related?
Because then it mostly involves like dealing with, you know, sick people who need help. And then this is like, oh no, I can't do that.
Okay.
That's too stressful, you know?
Yeah.
So I knew that wasn't for me, even though like I like my chemistry classes, biology. But my favorite subjects were like physics and literature. There's not much you can do using both at the same time. So it already pulls you like, yeah, you have to go one way or another, right?
You'd be a science fiction author.
Yeah, something like that. More on that later.
Yeah, okay.
No, I'm not writing a book.
Okay, I was going to ask. It would be cool if you were.
Yeah. Then I was like, okay, maybe I don't want to be teaching. And then like engineering is okay. But then I was like, I like pure science, not applied science. But pure science, they don't get much funding.
Yep.
And then I decided to go to law school.
You decided to go to law school?
Yes. I know.
Whoa.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I still don't know.
Okay.
But I did.
Yep. And so then, okay.
I thought I would have options, you know. Oh, you can be this and that. You can, a lawyer, a judge. Yeah. You can go to work for the police, whatever. I thought that would be the uni degree that would give me the most options of professions later on.
Yeah. and then so when you started law school, like, what did you think?
I made a mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the second semester, 10 in total, I was like, okay, I definitely made a mistake. But then at the same time, I didn't know what else I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I was still conflicted. So I kept going and I finished it.
Yeah. Wow. So, okay. A little bit of that I can sort of understand because, you know, my best subjects in school were English and maths, right? So when I was deciding what I wanted to do for uni, originally I was just thinking I was going to do engineering because my brother, you know, did engineering and, you know, obviously you look up to your older brother. And then I got the marks so that I could do law and engineering. So I ended up doing law and engineering. And it was just like my logic was really dumb. My logic was basically I'm good at English and maths and doing law and engineering is basically just continuing on with doing English and maths. So that's what I'll do. And at the time, I didn't really have too much thought in terms of what I could potentially move into after. Like I sort of identified that there's probably two fields that you can really use a law and engineering skill set. It's either going to be like civil and construction or cars and the automotive industry. And so then I ended up going into the automotive industry. So that was sort of how it worked for me. But for you, you know, deciding to go to law school and then completing it, like, I guess, was it, and so I guess part of you, the reason why there was no real need to quit is because you didn't really have anything else to sort of quit and do, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, in Brazil, the best unis are public, so I didn't have to pay, and it's hard to get in. So you just don't quit and like do nothing.
Yep.
You stay there because
Because
I was in the best law school in the country.
Yep.
So it's like, I'm not gonna quit and not be sure about what I'm gonna do with my life.
Yep. So then, what about did your parents offer you any guidance? You know, like were they like, you know, oh, you should do this or that, or?
Not really. But my mom obviously like was like so proud and like she loved the fact that I chose law. Yeah. So to this day, she asked me for legal advice sometimes.
And what about your dad? Did he ever say anything?
Not really. No.
No. Very easygoing.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, what did your parents do for work?
My mom, she works in education. She's like a type of social assistant.
Mm-hmm.
My dad, like, he did pretty much everything. Now he's retired.
Yeah. Okay. So then, what was your first job then?
My first job. It was probably one of my internships in law.
Yep.
I started interning when I was in the second year.
Yep. And I guess what did you, when you went into it, like, did that sort of reaffirm that you're in the wrong field?
Actually, yes and no. There was like some entertaining parts because there was like quite a lot of family law, so there is always some drama and so the backstories are hilarious sometimes. But then I was like, okay, maybe if I try a different area, that's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
And then I moved to another internship, and then if I did merger and acquisition, and then that was traumatic. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
That's really not for me. But then it was like in the fourth year already.
Yeah.
So I finished that internship, and I got a job in the public service, like in the Court of Audit in São Paulo. So it's an organization that we have there that it looks after a public budget. You know, if the city hall hires teachers, so whoever looks like how was this hiring made, like how much they spend on it. So that's what they do.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So, when you with the two internships, were they at the same company or were they different
companies?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then culture-wise, like from a work culture perspective, like were there things that you picked up from? Well, I guess the first internship was the first job that you went to, so you wouldn't have known, I guess, what it would like, what the work culture would have been like, right?
Yeah.
But then after going between the two companies, did you realize that, you know, was one better than the other? You know, for any particular reason? Was there any lessons that you learned, you know, through working in both of those two companies?
Yeah, I ended up doing more than two, but yeah, the first one like was a very small law firm, like 5 people, like 3 partners, and you know, all the 3 interns and someone in the reception. So like very very small. So it's pretty much like, you know, looking over what's going on, what we have going today. We have like anything that we have to submit today, and trying to study at the same time. And I had other places to work that were like much bigger, like massive corps. So pretty much getting used to work in a big company from a very early age.
Did you have a preference in terms of like a workplace style of culture? So I guess, you know, the reason why I ask that is because there'd be a lot of people out there that may not know, you know, how different companies can be.
Yeah.
Right? So I guess for you, you know, like what brings out the best in you? You know, do you prefer a company that's more laid back, or do you prefer, like, you know, is it better when there's deadlines and there's, you know, a lot more happening? Like, I guess, what's your preference?
I would say I prefer when there is a lot, not a lot, like there's more happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like pressure. You know, me personally, you know, I feel like it's very easy to just sort of go into sleep mode when there's not a lot happening.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, I have a better example than that, than
Okay.
those two interns. Uh, so, in some places, like you can be very complacent when you are in the public service in Brazil.
Mm.
If you get into the a certain spots, like no one's gonna take you out of there. You're gonna retire in the same position. You're gonna have like the same job for 30 years.
Wow.
And I work with some people like that, and I
Yeah.
was just like, okay, the money's good, but no, there is something else. Like that's not for me.
Yeah.
And there is some security, 100%, if you want to, raise a family and that's and buy a house and have a car, and that's your main goal in life. Go for it. But for me, I'm like, no, I need something else.
Yeah.
And then I quit a very secure job and came to Australia, and I didn't even know what I was doing with my life.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that. So, what made you decide to come to Australia? So, had you travelled before that?
I had traveled before, but I had never been here.
Okay.
But in all my travels, Australia was one of the places that everybody loved.
Okay.
Oh, Australia is amazing. You have to go to Australia. So first, obviously, I didn't come here didn't go rogue completely.
Yeah.
I first took an unpaid leave.
Okay.
So it was 3 months, and then it became 2 years, and then I eventually finally quit my job.
Oh, so you were actually still employed? You just took time off while you had first come here?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, wow.
And then I came here and didn't have exactly a plan. I was already like self-studying, like I was self-taught in coding, and I was trying to do some freelance here and there. So whenever there was an opportunity, I would, work for someone's website or do this type of stuff.
Yep.
And that was my first year here.
Yep.
But then I ended up staying.
Okay, so I want to draw on that a little bit more, but before I get to that, so where have you travelled? Had you travelled before you came to Australia?
A few countries in South America or America, like we used to call. Pretty much, if you are from any other country in Americas, we call the whole continent America. So
Okay. Yep.
I travel, is easiest if I put it this way. So I traveled to Argentina, Uruguay, Colombia, Cuba, and a few places in Southeast Asia as well. I think, I even went to Europe when they were having like the males soccer cup in Brazil.
Yep.
And the stadium was in between my work and home. Wow. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go away. I don't need to face 2 hours of traffic each way every day for a month.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Bye.
Yeah. Okay. So then in your travels, everybody was talking, Australia up. And then, so when you first came over here, were you originally coming here for a holiday or?
Yeah, kind of. I was like studying a little bit. I was like, I'm going to spend 6 months there and improve my English.
Okay.
So I kind of had like reasoning behind that.
Yep. And so then you're sitting on the plane and you're about to land in Australia. Like, did you already organise somewhere to stay or was
Yes, I had everything organized.
Yep. And then was there a culture shock for you? So, and the reason why I say that is because, in a lot of other overseas countries, like the lifestyle, people stay up later or, you know what I mean? Like,
in that sense, yes. In São Paulo, everything is open till very late.
Yeah.
Like the shops are still open till 10 p.m. So not having this option here was a bit, I didn't know in the beginning, I didn't know that like things that they stay open till late only on Thursdays.
Yeah.
Like why Thursdays in the first place?
Yeah.
That was a bit of a shock. Not have many places for like 24 hours food as well.
Yeah.
It's inconceivable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's right. So a lot of people, especially if they're coming from like, say, like the European countries as well, or even like Southeast Asian countries like Singapore, Malaysia, like the lifestyle is very different. Like people don't eat till probably 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Versus here, a lot of times people are eating a lot earlier because places don't stay open that late.
Yes.
So it takes a lot of getting used to, but at the same time, we also have places that open up, 5 a.m. in the morning so you can have breakfast. You can go to these sorts of places which overseas you wouldn't get, right?
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah.
So from that perspective, when you arrived in Sydney, did you arrive in Sydney or you?
Sydney, yeah.
So you decided you're going to go to Sydney?
Yes.
Yep. And then where were you staying?
In Glebe.
In Glebe. Okay. And then you mentioned that you had taught yourself coding, right? So that was just obviously through your own interest, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, a few courses, obviously, not just building stuff from, building apps or things like that. But I also did another uni that I didn't finish back in Brazil.
Okay.
It had some, it was IT related.
Yep.
It was system analysis and development.
Yep.
That was the official name.
Systems analysis and development. Okay.
Yeah, but at the end, after the first year, it was mostly accounting. So I was like,
Okay.
That's not what I want to learn.
And so, when did you? What I'm curious about is, you were working for these law firms, then you went into this government style role. When did you start to pick up the coding thing?
It was probably when I was already in the public service.
In the public service.
So I had a bit more time, and I had finished law school as well.
Yep. Okay, and so then when you finished law school, you're just like, I need something else to do.
Yes, yeah.
That's actually, look, see, I commend you for that, because when I got out of uni, I was like, I never want to learn again, right? Like that was my mentality. I felt like I was like so burnt out that I was like, I never want to learn again. And that was like really, I would say it's a very immature and dumb attitude to have, because if you're not learning, technically you're not growing, and if you're not growing, you're just slowly dying.
Yes, but this was also because you were intending to work on that field, right?
Yeah.
And for me, I'm like, I can't spend the next 40 years of my life doing this.
Yeah, okay.
I need to find something else.
Yeah. So then did you try other things before you settled on software and coding?
I actually did.
Yeah. What did you try?
I did other 2 years of literature as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, and I'm always curious about this. So when it comes to studying literature, like what's included in that? Is it just reading and then doing analysis based on?
Oh, you study phonetics. You study like history of languages, linguistic, which is probably the most difficult thing that I ever learned in my life.
Okay. What makes linguistics so challenging?
Look, if I knew more about it, I could tell you.
Okay, so it's just a very in-depth topic, right?
Oh, yes. I mean, I did calculus 1, 2, and 3, and for me, like, linguistics was...
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, was the challenge.
Yeah. See, it's one of... I always used to think, and like in high school when you go through and you study, like you're writing these essays about, literary works. And it's like... I think every kid must ask. I don't know if you and tell me if you did ask yourself this question. Did you ever wonder, did the person who authored this? So let's say Shakespeare as an example. Mm-hmm. You take any sort of work of Shakespeare and you're trying to write this essay about it, and we go and infer a whole bunch of different meanings, and that we overlay over the work, right?
Yeah.
Did you ever wonder whether Shakespeare was like, when he wrote it, he was just literally just writing a simple story,
like whatever?
Yeah. Right, and then, but when we all look back at it, we go, "Oh, there's so many layers now." Did you ever think that when you were studying it?
Oh yes, but mostly I didn't even get to this point. I was mostly studying Portuguese and grammar and yeah.
Okay, interesting. So then, I need to switch gears a little bit because I want to ask,
Sure.
When did your martial arts journey start then?
It was when I finished law school.
Okay.
And I started work. I had like my full-time work.
Yep.
So I had like more money to afford for gear, training, etc. I could dictate my own, my own routine. So that was when I started. It was something that I always wanted to do before. I always had interest, but it was hard to find the time, the location, and everything be like in the same place together.
Yep. So then what was the first martial art that you did?
Ninjitsu.
Ninjitsu.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a place in that close to where you were living to do
No,
that?
it wasn't. It was not actually close, but it was close to one of the train stations, and that was kind of close to work. So yeah, we could figure it out.
So, and why did you choose ninjutsu over all the,
I
like you're in
had
Brazil, right? Like,
like I always like Asian martial arts. I was fascinated by Jackie Chan and Jet Li when I was a kid.
yep,
So going for a Japanese martial art, it was okay to me. Like, didn't seem like alien at all. But I had a housemate when I was in uni that used to do it, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. I want to do it. So the first time I had the opportunity, I had the time to do it. I was like, I'm signing up.
yep. And then, so what was your first lesson like there? Like, what did they? Do you remember what they showed you, or?
The first lesson, no. I remember doing like triangles with my feet, like the footwork. I remember like lots of, torsions and limbs being displayed. But I don't remember the first class.
Yeah.
I only remember like I was so sure that I want to do it. Like I signed up like even before
Straight
doing the
away.
trial. So I was like, yes, I'm doing it.
So how long did you do ninjutsu for?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. Yep. And then, so did you get to do any weapons with ninjutsu? Normally there's weapons.
Yes.
Yep. Did you get to throw shurikens?
That probably I did like 3 times maximum. I would mostly do bow, handball.
Yeah. Sai? The 3-prong.
Yeah. A little bit of the katana as well.
Yep. Yeah, there's a real art to actually, people think, if you have a sword, you just swing it and can cut stuff, but to actually...
It gets stuck.
Yeah, it gets stuck.
That's one thing that I learned in law school, though.
What's that?
How weapons work.
Oh, really? Oh, from the criminal thing?
Yes.
You get to see, all the people that are getting chopped up or... Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. That's probably not the best way to learn.
No.
Okay. So then, so you did ninjutsu for 2.5 years, and then, so obviously that would have had to stop when you came to Australia, right? Or did you find something else when you were still in Brazil?
I stopped actually even before, because then my dojo moved to another city.
Oh, okay.
And that's when I started like jiu-jitsu.
Mm.
And I trained jiu-jitsu for 1 year there.
Yeah. Okay. And so then, from a teaching perspective, like the way that they educate people, between ninjutsu and jiu-jitsu, was it a totally different teaching style, or was the teaching style quite similar there?
I think for ninjutsu, there was much more of teaching the tradition, history. We had to learn about like 9 different martial arts schools of martial arts. So we have to know when it was generated, what this one was used for.
Yeah.
Which styles they influenced. There was a lot of history about it.
Yep.
And people would do trips to Japan to meet with the Soke, which was like the grandmaster equivalent, in jiu-jitsu.
Yep.
So in jiu-jitsu, I don't think people do. You obviously can do that,
Yep.
but I don't think that's something that most of teachers they spend time teaching.
Yeah. It's a different focus,
Yeah.
So I also came from a very traditional martial arts background. So I started karate when I was 5, and then did karate for 7 years, and then took a couple of years off, and then went into kung fu, and I did kung fu for the majority of my life. So I think the question that I always, and how I sort of reflect back on it, is it really depends on what is the purpose of the art that you're learning, right? So jiu-jitsu has a very sport focus nowadays, where there is a set of rules that everybody that competes in jiu-jitsu follows those rules. And as such, the game that is played has evolved to sort of how we see jiu-jitsu in, say, IBJJF competitions. You see a lot of people will pull guard and play their game from guard. Yeah. And then in other rule sets like ADCC, you might see a more wrestling focus. So it just really depends on what rules are being used for that competition. The problem with a lot of traditional styles of martial arts is that if there isn't much competition from that perspective, then like they sort of rely on this idea that, our techniques are too dangerous to be used. And that's when, you start to lose sight of reality.
Yes.
Right?
100%. I relate with that so much.
Yeah.
So yes, obviously jiu-jitsu is a sport. I'm not saying that's a bad thing or a good thing, but it is a sport.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I heard this so often.
Yeah.
in ninjitsu that we can't do this because this technique is mostly like breaking bones. So how can you even emulate this in real life? But at the same time, like, it's not very effective in the sense that I didn't even have like a good reaction time. Like when I had my first like jiu-jitsu classes, or I even tried like boxing at the same time as well, I was like, oh, those techniques didn't work here. I even tried to do a sparring session once, like before I couldn't even throw a punch, but I couldn't even react to, oh, I can't deflect this punch. No, I couldn't.
Yep.
Even though in ninjutsu, in theory, I should know.
Yep.
But no, because we never react. We would always allow the other person, the uke, to do the technique. Yeah. So
it's a cooperative versus, there's no real like pressure to test it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah. So, that, like, I think that there are, and I don't say that to disparage, traditional martial arts. I think there are some great traditional martial arts out there that do offer things that you don't necessarily get in jiu-jitsu. And an example like of that would be that I think you get a more well-rounded and a healthier sort of process for your body through traditional martial arts, because typically, there will be like some kind of strength building, there will be some kind of stretching that's all incorporated in the one class.
Yes.
Whereas most of the times, in jiu-jitsu, it's like, there's a warm-up, but, you're not really getting pushed in the warm-up. You're probably just running around, stretching your arms, doing some claps and, whatever else, shuffling your feet or whatever. And then you do your technique and then you roll. And then after class, it's like, it's up to you if you want to stretch or not. And most people don't. And they just go home. And then they wonder, in 10 years' time why everything hurts.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I didn't start any of those things in the first place to compete. That was never a thought that I had.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. So what was your thought? I'm curious because obviously, you're so competitive now.
Yes, now I do join competitions, but it's not like, oh, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to get good and then I'm going to go to tournaments. No. Well, there was some aspect of feeling safer. So I originally started doing martial arts to feel a bit more confident when something bad potentially would happen.
Yep.
So the idea was mostly self-defense in the beginning.
Yeah.
Even so much that I didn't even bother like not having like people my size to train, because I would always say, you know what, no woman who is my size is going to attack me on the street, so what's the point?
Yep. Yeah.
So it was very later, like it took me at least like 3 years to even start considering the possibility of like, oh, I want to do some comps.
Yep.
But even then, I used to joke until a couple of years ago, like, I join once a year a jiu-jitsu comp.
Yeah.
Maybe once every second year.
Yeah, wow. So it was more like an opportunistic thing. Oh, there's a comp on. Okay, away you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I never had like much prep for a comp, or it was like my main goal, or doing like comps back to back was never a thing for me until last year that I had 3 fights.
Yeah, we'll get to there. We'll get there. So, so you were doing jiu-jitsu, and so were you doing jiu-jitsu up until the time you left Brazil?
Yes, I did 1 year there.
Yeah. And so then when you came here, like what was your, and one of the things that I'm always curious about is, for me, I'm a very routine-based person. I like to have routine. So for you, uprooting your whole life over there to come over to a new country, like were you looking to try and establish your routine, or were you just taking in whatever happens?
Oh, yes. I was in that first year of jiu-jitsu, so I was very much obsessed.
Yep.
And one of my top priorities was to find a gym.
Yep.
And it was... and then I got it sorted in the first week and like training like 6-7 days a week.
So I'm curious, in terms of the instruction between, I guess, being in Brazil versus the instruction that you got here. Was it very different?
No.
No? It was very similar?
Yeah.
Okay. And was that the case, because how long were you at that jiu-jitsu gym in Glebe for?
1 year.
1 year. And then when you changed gyms, because you moved, right?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So when
then I moved to the eastern suburbs.
Yeah. So when you moved to the eastern suburbs and then you went to Eagles, was it?
Yes.
Yeah. Was the instruction very different there versus?
Then it was a bit different because Igor doesn't teach only Brazilian jiu-jitsu. There is a more, how can I say, his approach is a bit broader than that. He also has a Japanese jiu-jitsu background and many other backgrounds.
Yep.
So I think the coaching style was different.
Yep.
Because he incorporates so much more than only jiu-jitsu, even into self-defense. So that wasn't the main reason. But just because I'm in Australia, when I go to another jiu-jitsu gym, it's very similar. At the end of the day, like when it's Brazilian jiu-jitsu, like they have lots in common. They have probably even the same, masters.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. That's an interesting perspective, because I find, depending on where you go, even in jiu-jitsu, like, one of the beautiful things about jiu-jitsu is that you're welcome, almost anywhere.
Yeah.
So most schools nowadays are fairly open from that perspective. So if you're traveling, you end up in a different country or whatever, if there's a jiu-jitsu school and you message them, they're pretty okay for you to come in and visit and get some training in. But I find the quality of instruction does vary significantly from gym to gym.
Yes, but then, it doesn't matter the country where you are. It does vary. It depends on, or even the instructor in the same gym.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Yeah, like depending on who's taking the class can be very different as well.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So then when did you first start competing then? So was that when you were at Igor's, or did you compete when you were in
I think I did a couple competitions before. As a white belt. So, my first comp was here in Australia.
Yep.
And then I did the second one as well. Actually, I reckon I competed 3 times that year.
Wow.
There was an episode actually that put me off, maybe, now that I'm talking to you. Someone beat my boob in a comp.
What, when you
I was on top mount.
Yeah.
And then I was leaning on top of her to try to land an Americana.
Yeah.
And she bit my boob.
Wow.
And then I just like...
What are you doing?
Started, and then I moved up.
Yeah.
But then this was compromising my posture, right?
Yeah,
so I leaned on her again.
Yeah.
And she bit me again for the second time.
Wow.
And according to the referee, I don't recall that. So my hand was behind her head, trying to set up the Americana. So before I would release. According to the referee, I started shaking her head against the mat.
Yeah.
Because I started saying, are you biting me? Stop biting me. So I didn't know how to signalize to the referee that she was biting me. So it was like, I decided to yell at her and say, she is biting me.
Yeah.
Like really loud.
Yeah.
But according to the referee, I also shook her head against the mat.
Yeah.
So
you got DQ'd.
No, I didn't. I was penalized.
Yeah.
He just took a point over. Yeah. So it was just a fault. But then I was still arguing with the referee, like, why are you taking me? Why are you giving me a fault, not to her? She was the one who bit me.
Yeah.
And then I was still like caught up in the moment, like super, like I was super mad. And he reset the match. And then I got caught in a triangle and I lost the match.
Oh no.
And I was winning by quite a lot of points.
Wow. Well,
and that was the final.
Wow, that's of all the ways to lose a match, getting beat on the boob is definitely not one that I would.
I wish I was the crew though, at least
Yeah.
But no, it didn't happen. But even afterwards, he realized there was something really off there. Like why I was like giving away the position. So he came to talk to me. And he said, like, I'm sorry, but like I acted on what I saw, and I didn't see she biting you.
Because it's like hidden, right? Like,
you
underneath.
couldn't.
Were you in the gi as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like the gi's around her.
Yeah, exactly.
Can't really see.
So he couldn't see, and I was like, fair enough.
Yeah. Wow, that's a really primalistic, way that somebody's trying to defend themselves. Most people freak out, right? Like if you got somebody really good top pressure and somebody on the bottom who may not have experience, like if they just freak out, they just start gassing, like they gas themselves. But to to go and bite you, that's pretty savage.
Hey,
Like,
points on creativity here. So she was creative. That was the first.
did that turn you off competition?
Maybe did. I don't know. I think it did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would make you feel like, oh, that's a bit, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So then how long was it before you then, competed again? So what was it, did you compete in jiu-jitsu again or?
I did. Let me see. I think, I don't remember, but like, there was that year, like it was probably 2016. So I had like 2 or 3 comps. This interesting
Scenario?
match. I don't think I competed again as a white belt, probably only as a blue belt later on.
Mm-hmm.
But then what started pulling me off as well was the amount of people that you would have. Very little.
Yeah.
Like per division. So I was like, I'm not going to spend $100 to have like 2 matches.
Yep.
Sorry.
So this is where you got to talk, this is a message for all the female jiu-jitsu competitors out there, because I think most girls know this feeling, right? Where it's like, I think, and this is one of the good things about Smooth Comp is you can see, how many people are registered. But one of the bad things is also that you can see how many people are registered.
Are not registered.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So people always are like, oh, should I sign up? Oh, there's not many matches, and then they feel like, oh, there's no point doing it if there's not many people to compete with.
Yeah.
Right. But then the problem is that if you don't at least register, and I think in Smooth Comp you can actually, so like for grappling industries and things like that, you can register but not have paid, and it will just say has not paid yet.
Yeah.
Like, at least just put your name in if you're thinking about it, and then other people will see it, and then they'll be more likely to jump in too. I think that's my my perspective on it. But otherwise, it's very difficult for especially if your division doesn't have many people. It makes you less inclined to want to compete, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's also not only that. It's you don't have many. Anyway, like per division. If you go to a gym, like how many purple belts do you see there are my weight?
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yes. So, I guess the only thing I can say to that is like, the more people that sign up, the more people that, try and get involved, like it's only going to make you better. Like at the end of the day.
But it's fun, like,
you
have less and less. Every belt you get, you're going to have less people in the pool.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you have to start traveling for comps.
Yes.
So, okay. So then when did you have your first MMA fight then?
Last year.
Oh, so that was only last year.
Yes.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay. So so when you're at Eagles, were you doing everything as well, or were you mainly focusing on jiu-jitsu?
I started with jiu-jitsu, but like after 1 year and a half, I started doing Muay Thai as well. Yep. And sometimes I would join boxing, wrestling. Yep.
And do you have a favorite? Like, is there a particular style that you enjoy more?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
What's that?
Oh,
huh?
Surprise.
Surprise?
No, it's jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, okay.
Always will be.
Yeah. And why is that? Like, what makes jiu-jitsu resonate more for you versus the other styles?
I think it's how it works. That you have time to think about what you're doing. I mean, you always have, the stuff, obviously. But you have the way you set up, the way you adjust when things don't work. I see it more as a game. And there is a lot of strategy. Obviously, you do have that in boxing and Muay Thai as well, but there is a component of the timing, like that even if you have the perfect technique and if you don't have the timing well and things happen so fast, it doesn't work. Yeah. In jiu-jitsu, you don't need exactly that timing. It will help you with your sweeps, etc. But it's more about setting up all the time and attacking multiple things and deceiving. And so I think it's just the dynamic that I like better, and it works better for me as well. Yeah.
So then do you prefer training in the gi or without the gi?
That's polemic as well. I prefer the gi.
Yeah. So the moment when you were saying that, you're thinking about the setups and things like that, I was like, I think you're a gi girl.
I am guilty.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different pace. In gi, you can slow things right down. you know, you get the right grips and you get the right setups, and boom, you know, you can be almost on autopilot with, you know, very little things that your opponent can come against you unless they're very good at, you know, countering the grips or reestablishing their own grips, right? So, but it's one of those things, you know, that I love the chaos. You know, I appreciate chaos. I love the, you know, the chaos of the scramble and when things, you know, are everywhere. So that's why I like, for me, I prefer no-gi. And, but, you know, when it comes to the different styles, like I can't honestly say I have a favorite. Like I enjoy the boxing, I enjoy Muay Thai, I enjoy Jiu-Jitsu, I enjoy it all. I can say, you know, I reckon my weakness is probably just wrestling in open space. Because just the amount of mat time that I had doing that is the least out of the rest of it.
Yeah.
You know, doesn't mean I enjoy it any less. Like, of course, nobody likes getting their ass kicked, right? Like nobody enjoys losing. But at the same time, it's like, you know, I think, you know, I think it depends on what your end goal is. Like, is your goal to improve or is your goal to win in the gym? Because they're two different mindsets, right? If your goal is to just win, then all you're going to do is just play the same old game every single time that, you know, works for you. Whereas if your goal is to improve, you actually want to put yourselves in that difficult position so that then you can work out of it and keep improving, right? Yeah. So for you in terms of your, like the way that you approach martial arts, do you do any other study towards martial arts? Like, do you watch instructionals? Do you do any of that sort of stuff? Or you just mainly focus on what is being taught in the gym and focus on that?
I mostly focus on the classes that I attend and some techniques that this works for me, this doesn't, and then I try to practice or even sometimes watch more videos. But just watch the videos and not practice at the same time, I don't think it works much. Yeah. Now you need to, like with anything, right? Like you're not going to retain knowledge unless you put it into use. You know, you can watch an 8-hour long instructional, but then if you don't actually go and practice what's in it, you'll never use it anyway. You might remember a bits and pieces of what it was trying to tell you, but then you actually need to be in those positions trying to work it out, right? I normally use videos more for problem solving, like when there is something that I'm trying to do and then it's not working really well, I'm like, why? So then I try to find a few different videos. But other than that, it's not my main source. Okay. And then in terms of mixing it up with your strength and conditioning and things like that, like I guess, when did you start thinking about like doing more strength and conditioning and that side of things? Because most people, like say if you do jiu-jitsu, generally people just will do jiu-jitsu. They don't really go to the gym. They don't really do, you know, any running or any of these other things. I guess for you, you know, was that something that you've only started to include more of nowadays, or is that something that you've always had in your training regime? I actually started that before jiu-jitsu. Okay. So in that time in between ninjitsu and jiu-jitsu, there was like looking for something to do. So I eventually ended up having some time at the gym. So I was doing strength and conditioning and running as well. Short runs like 5K, 7K. And that's something that... I love how you say that. That's a short run. For some people, like 5Ks or 7Ks is a very long run to them. Well, some people do marathons, and I never even consider doing that. So that's what I mean. So then, so when you started doing, like going to the gym, like did you get a trainer or anything, or you just tried to work it out yourself? Like, what was your process? There was a few trainers in the gym. Like, it's kind of mandatory to have trainers in the gym in Brazil, so you cannot have like unattended gyms. Oh, that's good. So they create programs for you depending on the place where you are. So that's how I first started. That's actually a much better way than, you know, the way our gyms are set up here. Like, yes, I think most gyms will give you a PT or something for a consultation or something like that when you first sign up or something. But the amount of people that are going to the gym and just doing their own thing, like, and then wondering, why do I not get results? You know, but then how much do you actually, you know about what you're doing? Because if you're just doing the same exercises every single time, like how are you sure that that's actually benefiting what your body needs? Right. So, did that create like a lot more awareness for you in terms of like your own, like, you know, body from a strength perspective, a flexibility perspective? Totally. Alrighty, we're back. Yes.
So we had some technical difficulties after when we first recorded. So we came back and we've got a few more bits and pieces to cover. My mic's a bit high. I'm going to turn that down a touch. But we were talking about injuries.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So very many.
So should we? I think we should go reverse chronological order. We'll go from the most recent and work our way backwards.
Oh, yeah. I think the most recent was like a fractured rib that I had late last year.
Yep.
Like October, November. It put like me for like 8 weeks off training.
Wow.
I also had like a broken finger like in the mid of the year, and that was like probably like 3-4 months because, well, technically you're supposed to rest and immobilize. I didn't do it. I was just taping up and training. So it takes forever to heal when you do that.
Yep.
And the worst one was literally last year. It was last year already. That I ruptured all the ligaments on my left elbow.
On your left elbow?
Yeah.
From an armbar or something, or?
Yeah, it was for an armbar. It was my first fight.
Oh, wow. Wow. So, how did you... It's one of those ones where when something like that happens, because you don't want to give up, right? Like, you just want to keep fighting. But then at the same time, it's like, once it goes, you got to tap.
Well, I actually tapped. Funny that you mentioned that. It was my first fight.
Yeah.
So for me, having the experience in jiu-jitsu, I was used to, you tap, people stop immediately the submission, right?
Yeah.
That's how it normally happens. I realized actually pretty quick that I wouldn't get out, so I tapped, but my other hand was like underneath her, so no one could see there was tapping.
Yeah.
And I also tried to tap verbally, but the place was a bit loud, so it was hard like for the referee to hear. And the referee was still a bit slow to stop her. So what I did is I stood up just to free my hand, but obviously that helps the armbar.
Yeah.
Right, so it's good to to clarify that now, because like when you look, like it looks like I'm just standing up to
try and get out,
try to get out, which is probably the worst way to defend an armbar.
Yep.
But I was just trying to free my hand underneath so I could tap and they would stop. Yeah. But yeah, it was too late.
So did you have to have any surgery for that, or?
Luckily, it was grade 2.
Yep.
It was a grade 2 tear. All the ligaments were compromised, like some worse than others. But it was just like 3 months of physio, like exercising every day. But other than that, I didn't need surgery. Yep. And now I feel like it never happened.
Oh, that's great. That's great. It's one of those ones, elbows, you sort of, like when you first get your elbow hyperextended, you feel like a bit of a goose, like, cause it's like, oh, it hurts. Like it's just such a silly injury, right? But then, if you allow your elbow to get hyperextended multiple times, like whether it's in training or whatever, you start to develop bone spurs. Like you get these little fragments in your elbow. Oh. Yeah, and so like quite a few of the jiu-jitsu guys that I know or train with, they've got like messed up elbows from it. So even my coach Dave at Integrated Combat Center, like one of his arms, it's like it doesn't straighten all the way because there's bone fragments just floating around in there. And then his brother Steve, same thing, but he actually managed to have like keyhole surgery. So they made like 4 little incisions and sucked the little bone chips out. Sounds horrible. But yeah, like even, and so there's 2 guys already. And then one of my other mates, Dexter, who trains out at VT1, like he's got the same thing. He can no longer, and so for people that ever roll with Dexter, he's a brown belt. He can't finish you with a rear naked choke because he can't extend his elbow. He can't pull his arm far back enough to cut off the carotid.
He cannot bend it. Yeah.
So that's his Achilles heel, people. So if you ever roll with Dexter, just give him the back and he won't be able to finish you from there. But yeah, no, like his mobility is really bad. He can't touch his own shoulder and things like that because it's just like too many bone fragments in there. So just something to be mindful of. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be from arm bars and getting hyperextended. Like I've got one. I think I've got one small one. On the point of my elbow.
Oh, I also have one on the outside.
Yeah. And that can be like from bracing kicks, like you get kicked on the elbow, and then that'll like just chip away a little bit at the bone. And it's okay if it doesn't grow, but like if it's in there and then it starts to grow a little bit, then you sometimes like you post on your elbow and you feel like this, something uncomfortable there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's injuries are they're a part of training, right? But it's also like, I feel like they're a mental challenge. Like they test your mindset whenever you get injured. And you've had a couple of good ones. The rib's always a good one. And the elbow's always a good one. Like I guess what's your mindset when you have an injury like that? Like obviously you can't just go back into the training room and get into training straight away. Like mentally, how does it affect you?
Yeah, sometimes like we try to, like when I had a fractured finger, I was still training, and I had 2 fights with this fractured finger. I'm not recommending anyone to do that, but you just do it because you want to have a fight, and you already booked stuff. You told your friends that you're fighting, and you don't want to give up, and you think, oh, I'm gonna be okay. But yeah, sometimes when you have like a fractured rib, you can't do much about it.
Yep.
So for me, it was an opportunity like to focus on strength and conditioning and do the things that I could work around. When I injured my elbow, though, I was a bit more down. I was not so positive because I didn't even know if I was going to need surgery, if I was going to be able to fight again. That was my first fight, so I started to self-doubt myself as well.
So then, like from a mental perspective, like self-doubts, everybody gets them.
Yep.
How do you work through it? Like, for you, like what have you found works for you to try and, talk yourself around and get through these stages where, you get a bit low and or doubtful of yourself?
What happens is that as much as I was like, oh, do I want to have a fight again, or having this sort of thoughts, I still couldn't stay away from the gym. So I was always doing something, and as soon as I could, I was hitting pads again. I was still kicking pads, and eventually I was like, no, of course I'm gonna do it again.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? It's like almost like it's a bit like a drug, right? You get addicted to it, and you wanna keep coming back to it. And I think it's one of the most positive addictions you can have. Like it's better than obviously doing physical hard drugs. Like it's you're doing something that's healthy for your body. It's almost like a bit of meditation as well, because you get your mind out from anything else that's going on in your world, and you're just focusing purely on whatever's in front of you. Because if not, then you're probably getting hit and you're probably going to get more hurt, right? So you really have to like tune in and get into this phase where you're just really in the moment. I guess, from that perspective, right, like with IMMAF Worlds coming up, how mentally, like, I guess, how are you approaching it? Like what does it mean for you to obviously get this opportunity to represent Australia on the world stage? And, how do you, I guess, do you get nervous? Do you get excited? Like how are you sort of thinking about it mentally?
I mean, obviously something that can potentially like get anyone like nervous or give you anxiety. But I try to think is like when I look back of the things that I did in my life, like that's definitely going to be one of the highlights. Like just being there is already like, I'm so proud to be able to have this opportunity to represent Australia, to be there with my team, with my coaches, like teammates. So it is already like, regardless, like it's something that I'm never going to regret doing. So I feel in a certain way very optimistic about it. On top of I have been training really hard, so like it can only get better. Yeah,
it's one of those things like you put so much into the training that when you get there, everybody's always hopeful for the best possible outcome.
Yeah,
right. And the advantage that having a good training camp gives you is that mentally you feel like, oh, I feel the best that I've ever been. Yes. Right? And that can be an advantage. But at the same time, it's like sometimes like there's been days where it's like you could have the worst camp, but you still have a great outcome, right? Like it's, you have this, whether you have a positive or a negative mindset in terms of how camp was, it doesn't really influence how you were on the day. The point is that you need to be on point on the day.
Yes.
Well, in your case, probably for 5 days.
Yes, there is also that.
Do they do weigh-ins every day, or is it just
every day?
Every day that you're fighting, you've got to weigh in the morning.
Yeah. Yes, correct.
So it's a bit like a jiu-jitsu comp in that sense. It's same day weigh-in. It's
yeah.
So
that's that I never cut weight for jiu-jitsu. So
yeah. So I from a weight cut standpoint, like, so that means that you're already cutting weight now, right? Or yes, you're starting to try and bring your weight down, I guess.
Oh yeah, it has been quite a few weeks.
Yep. And have you like in terms of how do you track towards that goal? Like in terms of your plan, have you got like little stages where it's like, okay, once I get to this point, I can like relax for a day and then go again, or like how you just have to be on point the whole time all the way through?
Depends. I like to do like kind of like blocks.
Yep.
So I like to start really early. Let's say if I can start like even like 3 months in advance. Like,
Yep.
so that was what I was planning originally.
Yep.
Before I broke my rib.
Yep.
And then like just to start cutting slowly and progressively going harder and harder. You know? I don't like to have like only 4 weeks or like leaves the 6 weeks to do all the cut there.
Yep.
And then obviously I allow myself to have some breaks. Otherwise, it's really hard to stay tuned for like such a long period of time.
Yep.
Also, another reason why for me can take so long is because my previous fight was like in a division above.
Okay.
So I had some extra weight to come down.
Yep.
But then the last few weeks, it takes a lot more discipline because then you want to be really light because it's 5 days.
Yep. You know, with IMMAF, and one of the great things about IMMAF is that as an organization, they're doing some really great things around the world. Like, I think when you watch the UFC now, you see most of the officials, referees, all those kinds of people, they have like MMAF on their shirts and the cutmen as well. So that means that they're all registered with IMMAF or MMAF, which is, you know, part of IMMAF. And from that perspective, like the production value of the competition is actually going to be very, very high. It's like it's all held to a very, very high standard. So you did the IMMAF Oceania that was up in Queensland, right?
Yes.
Yep. And like, I guess talk me through that event. Like, what was your experience like at that event? How did you find it?
That was actually only my second fight. Yep. So after recovering my elbow for a few months and going back into training, that was my first opportunity to fight again. Like, we tried to do a few small promotions, like, and to get into some cards locally, but that was not possible. To get a bit more experience before the tournament. But I decided to go anyway, and it was my first fight as a flyweight, and I felt like very strong and confident in that weight. So I realized, okay, that's my division for real. Even if I have to do that 5 days in a row, I'm gonna do that. And there was only another opponent, but it was a really tough fight. She was very good judoka. Like, she kind of almost took me down in the first round, but I reverted the position, and I managed to get a second round stoppage. Yep.
And then, so after the Oceania competition, you had one more fight after that, right? That was the super fight one?
Yes, I had a super fight in September.
Yep. I remember watching that. That was a very dominant performance from you. You just sort of came, you almost like stormed the gates. It was like, you know, the bell went off and in you were, and then, you know, on your A game, and you got the finish pretty quickly in round 1, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the first round, yeah.
So I guess, you know, mentally when you have a win like that, like, how does that make you feel in reflection? Like, how do you reflect on that?
It was just like things like coming full cycle, because obviously you expect or want to win every single fight of yours, but this is not possible. It's a sport at the end of the day. But when you have like such a rough start, and then you see that like things, they start falling into place, you know, and then the second fight was a bit better, and then the third fight I didn't even get a punch, you know, so it was like,
bring on more of this.
Obviously it's not gonna always be like that, but it feels like, okay, I'm doing things right finally, and gaining more experience along the way.
And I guess from a training standpoint, right? Like, how has your training sort of changed over the years? You know, obviously we'll forget about the ninjitsu side, right? But once you started, like, so if you sort of reflect back from, you know, when you started your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu journey versus the training that you do now, like, how do you feel like all those components are sort of you know, started to click in together to formulate your game?
When I first started Jiu-Jitsu, I didn't have exactly like a goal in mind, or I didn't track any particular competitions or events. So it was just something like overall fitness, being there, is that thing that you mentioned about meditation. Is like I cannot think about anything else. I forget. I leave all my problems behind. So it was just like my safe space. It was really good to be there. And then when I started competing, when I started adding even like sparring sessions before I had any intention of joining, actually having a fight, I just started like paying more attention to my overall fitness level, and how can I get more training in? How can I get fitter for this? And then we go to the next level when you start actually having fights. That then, I not only I want to do more, but I want to have a structure. I want to be more efficient. I want to how can I optimize that? Like, how can I work on my strengths? So then I started to finally targeting what I need to do to achieve what I want to achieve.
Yeah. And obviously, Coach Renato helps you with that as well, right? Like you've got your specific focuses, but at the same time, he'll be always adding things that are specific to your game, to you as well, right?
Yeah. That's what I'm doing currently.
Yep. Okay. And so, with IMMAF, because it's an amateur competition, but, when I say that, it's like I would say, going to IMMAF is basically like the mixed martial arts Olympics, so to speak. But, there isn't really any funding being an amateur, competition, so to speak. So, give people a bit of a spiel about, how they can support you and why they should support you going on this bit of a experience and this journey.
We all do this for the love of the sport. It's something that once you're there, it's so immersive and like you said, even addictive.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's kind of still small in Australia. Obviously we have great champs, but it's not something still perceived as of enough relevance to be in the Olympics or anything like that. So when you get injured, that's on you. If people have to miss work or for training, for comps, for weightings, it's always on you. So it's really difficult in that sense, and especially if you have a work that you have to be there physically. So I'm really lucky that I can work from home, and this makes things much more flexible. But it's still when you have to go overseas to represent the country, it's next level. So if you like and you can, it would be great to have your support. And it's another way to be part of it, because you don't need to be necessarily inside the cage, right, to be part of it. And I think if that was me, I would be really proud to be able to support someone who is doing something like that. I would like to see someone from the beginning, because it's really is easy to support someone who's already there in the top, but at the same time, who needs most support at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the things why I do so much grassroots stuff with MMA and combat sports, is because, the jump between going from amateur to professional is not this massive divide that people think. People think, when you go from amateur to professional, it's like you're jumping across the Grand Canyon. It's not like that. It's, you're basically working yourself up that hill. And the only difference between, summiting that hill and making it to that professional stake is how long have you been working to try and climb up that hill, right? And throughout your journey, as you keep and notching more fights onto your belt, some people, they might get to the professional ranks a little bit faster because they have the right people that are helping to promote them, or they've taken some really notable fights against people with bigger names and things like that, and so that helps them to sort of jump ahead. I think when people think of, say, UFC fighters, there are fighters that have been grinding, their whole careers to get to where they are. And then there's others that seem, like an example would be, say, Sage Northcutt. He was young, good looking guy, came into the UFC, wasn't an easy, opportunity for him. And now he fights in one. But, because, he's a good looking guy and he had, very marketables from that perspective, it was an opportunity, a great opportunity for him to go into the UFC and do things like that. So, when it comes to, the amateur ranks and people that are trying to break through from amateur to professional, so off the top of my head, Jordan Thomas, did the last IMMAF Worlds, and now he's a pro fighter as well, so that IMMAF is a great sort of platform that gives people that opportunity. It's like a notch in your belt, you know, to go and experience that level of competition, competing against international level competition as well.
Yes.
You know, that's an amazing thing. And, you know, I think, you know, for people to, if they want to reach out to try and sponsor you and things like that, it's probably best to touch base with you on Instagram. So Mesquita MMA,
yes.
underscore MMA.
Yeah.
And, or, you know, check out the GoFundMe. I'll put a link to that as well.
Okay, thank you.
But can I, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want, but I remember, you know, when we've talked outside of the podcast, you mentioned that, you know, at one point, you know, you were quite down, like, you know, you had a bit of depression, and training was what helped you to get through it.
Yes.
Can we talk a little bit about that, or?
Yes, we can. I believe the last couple years, 3 years almost, were really difficult for everybody.
Yeah.
So many things changed. We lost so many people as well, and we had to get used to lockdowns and many unexpected things. But one thing that not always, but like for the last almost the last decade, that has helping me consistently to stay grounded and be the person that I am and function. It is waking up knowing that I'm going to go to the gym later. You know, whatever happens, like my day could be horrible, but I'm going to have that moment to myself. And that was taken away from me. So it was really difficult. And the first lockdown was a bit of a shock. So we were still trying to process what's going to happen. But the second one here in Australia for me in New South Wales was the worst. And it was also longer. So not knowing when things would go back to normal, when I was going to be able to see my family back in Brazil again, because the borders were also closed.
Yeah, wow. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So everything combined, like losing that daily routine that was so important to me.
Yep.
And still having all this unknown ahead was just like very difficult time.
So then when you managed to get back into the gym and get the work in, do you remember how that first session felt? Were you just like, oh, where's this been in my life?
Yeah, it was also tiring. 4 months of not going to the gym, even though like I was still like running, but like I don't run for 3 hours.
Yeah, true.
Sometimes I do spend 3 hours in the gym and I don't even see it.
Yeah.
It's a completely different, like time is relative, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's one of the ways, you know, you're doing something that you really enjoy. You know, you get into it, and then next thing you know, you look at the clock and you go, oh, I'm in trouble. Like I'm running late now or whatever. Happens to me all the time. Sorry to my wife, because a lot of times I go to the gym and we get the work in, and then I check my phone after, and then the message is, oh, are you coming home yet? And it's like, oops, we're a little bit late.
Yep.
But you know, that's you know, we're doing things that we love, right?
Yes.
So. So if people want to follow your journey, I'm sure IMMAF Worlds will be live streamed as well.
Yeah, they're going to put a link for that as well.
Yep.
It's not available just yet, but I will put a link for that.
Yep. And make sure you're following Faine over here, you know, at Mesquita, MESQUITA.
Yes.
_ MMA.
Yes.
And let's follow her along and see how her journey goes over in IMMAF Worlds and what the future may hold for you.
Nice. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.